Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining this broadcast. I'm Major General Jerry Grizzle, President and Superintendent of the New Mexico Military Institute. I'd like to introduce the others that are on the call with me, and they at various times will answer some of the questions that we have been presented to us for us to answer for you. The Commandant of Cadets, Lieutenant Colonel John Graff, is on the call. Our Chief Financial Officer and Director of our Human Resource Department, Colonel Judy Sharmer, is on the call, and Colonel George Brick, the Vice Dean of the entire school and the high school principal, are on the call with us today. I think it's an understatement to say these are unprecedented times. I doubt that anyone would have anticipated spending their Saturday afternoon in a forum like this, but it's certainly necessary. I want you to know that as a military school, a military educational institution, that we are as prepared as you could possibly be. We have tapped into all of the education and experience factors of our staff and faculty to put together a response plan. I want you to know that plan is quickly changing. I want to make a quick statement that I hope everyone will understand, and this might answer some of the questions that you've had about the actions you've seen the state of New Mexico take and New Mexico Military Institute. And that is to remind everyone that we are a part of the state educational system. We are not a private school. We're not an independent school. Since 1912, we have been a part of the state educational system. So the guidance and directives that are coming out of the governor's office, we follow accordingly. So as we talk about some of these things, I want you to understand that we are following the guidance, the proclamations that she has signed and put into place, the edicts that are coming out of her office. We must comply with those. And that has governed our actions up to this point. We have a plan, and the plan is in place until April 6th. Why that date? That is the date that the governor mandatorily closed all public education institutions in this state. She then, a few days later, actually I got the memo at 9:52 p.m. last Saturday night. That's how fast things are moving. I got the letter or the edict from the governor as to how higher education was to respond to all of these proclamations, including health bans, travel bans, and the public education closure for 3 weeks. So that April 6th date is the date, unless she changes again, that is expected to resume classroom education. We have prepared several different scenarios that we are planning for, depending upon what our final answer is. So we have 2 weeks left of that 3-week period. The first week, this past week, was our spring break week. We were already in the planning process for that. That quickly changed during the week. The first thing we did was to take care of all of our international students who we knew could not travel for travel ban. They were all taken care of either with ambassador families, friends, or family in the United States so that none of them traveled overseas. They will be returning, some as early as this evening, the rest tomorrow. The next thing we did on Wednesday was when the president initiated an additional travel ban to Europe. That now affected some more of our cadets who had planned to attend and return home. They now had to stay here. The third group we had to deal with very quickly was our athletes. Our athletes, both high school and junior college, were staying over the spring break to participate in tournaments. We had baseball tournaments we were hosting. We had golf tournaments, tennis tournaments that we were attending. Those students now, because the New Mexico Athletic Association and the National Junior College Athletic Association have canceled all sporting events through the end of the semester. So those students, when we found that out, were allowed to leave. We have very few athletes here today or that will be returning. So our primary focus when we start back tonight and tomorrow will be on our international students. I want you to also understand you can go to our webpage, nmmi.edu. We post everything as fast as we have it. Proclamations from the governor's office that I mentioned, we first look to see what implications affect NMMI. We adapt and adjust accordingly, and then we post that information, both the direct response from the governor and then our response as it relates to the various issues outlined in her proclamations. So what we'd like to do with this call is some of you have sent questions in already. If some of you have questions while we're in the middle of this broadcast, you can go to YouTube chat and type in your question, and we will work it into answering if it doesn't get answered by some of the other questions that we'll be covering as we go along. So I'd like to start with some of the questions we have and that apply, we think, to a lot of the misunderstandings or concerns that you have as parents, alums, family, even cadets and faculty. So the first one, will returning cadets be quarantined? Let's start with a little terminology here. The proper term is not quarantined. Right now in the state, per the governor's proclamation, she has said that anyone who went out of state and comes back into the state must go into, the term is self-isolation. It's voluntary, it's not mandatory, but we are honoring that. So when the cadets return, those that I mentioned that will be coming back, they will go into self-isolation. What that means is that they will be assigned a room if it's not their own, because we're going to try to consolidate them in a tighter area to take care of them. They will report to the command center, they will report in, and then they will go to their room. They will not go to the infirmary for screening because we don't want to infect the infirmary. They will go to their room. If someone shows symptomatic symptoms, they are to then notify the infirmary and they will be taken there on an individual basis. So only those students that I talked about previously are expected to return. When we left here on Friday a week ago, we instructed everyone to take all of their books, all of their study materials, and their laptops so they could continue during this 3-week period from home. So we do not expect anyone to return that's not in that category that I mentioned. I hope that answers that question. Are all cadets allowed back on post? From what I just said, you should understand the answer is no. We don't want anyone to return to post other than those, primarily the international students who, due to travel ban, had no other option but to stay in the state. And we've taken care of those. So no, we do not want any other student to return to post right now. While we wait on this answer from the governor as to whether she will resume classroom education on or about April 6th, or will be in some type of continuation of the current status, or possibly a cancellation of classroom education for the remainder of the year. Those are all unknowns that we're waiting on guidance from the governor's office. Will NMMI transition to online academics? Yes, that's what we instructed the students when they left here. So beginning Monday, March 23rd, we will start online education. Students will call in at the regular scheduled time. Their teachers will instruct them online as if they were in the classroom. We'll follow the same schedule as if we were here at NMMI. In addition, every class that's being taught online will be recorded and posted. So if someone has an internet interruption or needs to go back later, they can access the class that has been recorded. And so now, with one exception, I say 1, 2, or 3, it's very difficult to teach band online. It's very difficult to teach stained glass class online. So there are some courses that we are still developing a methodology to ensure that those educational offerings are taught. But for the most part, the traditional classroom education will switch to online on Monday, March 23rd. How will cadets obtain their meals? Again, I want to remind you, we're talking about for the next 2 weeks, and we're talking about a small group, that international population and a few athletes. We have worked with our contract carrier, Sodexo. They will be preparing meals in a grab and go or a meal to go type configuration. We will take the meals to a common place, and then the students exercising another term I hope you will please understand that goes along with self-isolation is social distancing. Social distancing is described as 6 to 10 foot separation. So we will practice the self-isolation. When they're outside their rooms, then they will keep social distance between them. As they move to pick up their meals, any student that's on medication will follow the same protocols we have now. Their medications will be in the infirmary. They will exercise social distance, moving with separation, and go get their medications. Are visitors allowed at NMMI? The answer politely is no. The campus essentially is closed to all outsiders. We will be having some members of staff and faculty here during the time of this next 2 weeks, but essentially the campus is closed to all outside visitors. What about graduation? Right now, we're still planning on a graduation. What it will look like, what form it will take, we don't really know. But to honor our graduates, we will form and plan some type of graduation. We just caution you, it may be a little non-traditional, again, in these unprecedented times. Are staff and faculty required to come to work? The answer to that is no, if you first fit into that first category. If during this spring break time period, you crossed the state line, you went out of state to visit family or for whatever reason, and you come back into the state, you need to go into the 14-day self-isolation period. If you did not do that and can come to work, I've given all of the directors and officers of the school the authority within their workforce to schedule time as needed to accomplish what needs to be done. So what does that mean? They can stagger schedules. They can bring part of the workforce in one day, part of the workforce in the next day. They have the ability to manage their workforce to accomplish the things they need to do within their areas of responsibility. So are they required to be here? No. If they're in that 14-day, they must stay at home. We've told the faculty if they did not go out of state and if they choose to come to their classroom to teach their class, they would be the only one in there. They'd be speaking to a camera just like I'm doing now. And when they finish, they can go home. The reason they might want to do that is the IT support to ensure they have the proper bandwidth and equipment to make their online communication. But they're not required to come to work. Will the staff be paid if they are asked to work from home? That is, the answer is yes. There is one group, however, that we're very proud of the way we approach our folks here, and that is we have some hourly employees who are not full-time. For instance, those that have been on campus, the members of the Godfrey Athletic Center that work the front desk, check people in who are going in to work out. Those folks will be, Judy Charmer is on the call, and if I have not answered it correctly, Judy, please jump in. But a list was given to all supervisors of those people who were in that part-time hourly status. We're encouraging supervisors to reach out to them and use them in a method different than what they would be used as what they were hired for, but that way they continue to draw a paycheck. But all of our full-time employees, regardless of what department they work in, will continue to be paid. Is NMMI going to reduced hours? The answer is yes. In the summer, we call them summer hours or reduced hours. We leave essentially an hour earlier. Our facilities crew usually comes in at 6:30, leaves at 2:30. The staff comes in at 7:30, leaves at 3:30. We will essentially be following those hours for the next 2 weeks. That's some of the questions that we've had sent to us that we had already worked up the answers. Now, since we started the publication and the broadcast, we've had quite a few other questions come on board. So I'd like to go through those. Some I definitely will defer to the other members that are on the call with me to help get the proper answer for you. The first one, will all cadets be returning to post by April 5th, regardless of any changes? I think we've answered that. The answer is no. The only ones that we expect to be here for the next 2 weeks is primarily the international students who could not leave because of travel restrictions. When should students return from out of state? The answer again is embedded in whenever we get information from the governor about what the next step will be at NMMI. If it is to move to completely online education, there'll be no reason for anyone to return. So we just don't know that answer right now. Since our student will be missing at least 2 weeks of being on campus, will we get a refund for room and board? I'm going to defer to Colonel Charmer and ask Judy to answer that question.
Thank you. That's a very good question. We do anticipate having some form of refund or credit solution for a pro rata portion of the board and laundry. But as General Grizzle mentioned, that it is a very fluid situation, and so please be patient with us, and we will create a final refund schedule after April the 6th.
Thank you, Judy. The next two questions kind of go together, and I think they may answer a lot of questions as it relates to our international students and their ability to access online education. If my son comes home to New Zealand, will he be able to still school online from outside the United States? The answer is yes. The internet doesn't know any boundaries. We will be broadcasting those classes, as I mentioned. We'll also be recording them. So if for some reason they have internet interruption or they can't get on at a certain time, they can always go on later and then access the recorded version of the class. So I hope any international student or parent that's on here realizes that they will always be able to access that class that they were, if they missed it because of some internet interruption. What happens if the virus has not calmed down by the end of July and the borders are still closed? What happens with our international cadets? Well, this really is a question in my mind that's pertinent for the next 2 weeks, because as soon as we know what the governor is going to allow us to do or ask us to do, if it's to close and not have any classroom education for the remainder of the semester, we're going to be working with every single student that's on this domiciled here at that point to get them home just as fast as we possibly can. We know there's some travel restrictions that we have to be dealt with, and if there's not any way other than for that student to stay here, then they will be welcome. They will stay here on the campus. They will be cared for in their dorm room, and meals and insurance purposes, all those things that are in place now will stay in place until we can work with them on an individual basis to get us home. So again, if we get that decision to move to completely online education for the rest of the semester, we'll be trying to get everybody home just as fast as we can once that decision is made. NMMI, having both a high school and a college and having the capabilities of online instruction, I would feel much more comfortable if my cadet would be able to finish the year online. Well, as we've said, that may be the probability for all of us is to finish online. This is a personal decision that you need to make as a family, that even if we were to return to classroom education, do you return to NMMI? We respect that decision, and the answer is yes. We will continue the online education through the end of the semester, because we know we have students right now who got caught in the travel ban, and we've actually been working with them this entire semester. We have one young lady from China who's a high school senior, and she's been taking her classes this entire semester online to ensure that she graduates in a timely manner. As an international cadet, can our student continue to stay in campus after the 2 weeks or till the end of the semester? I think I kind of answered that. The answer certainly during this 2 weeks, and hopefully as soon as we know, we'll work to get them home. The governor made it very clear in her edict out to higher education that we provide for those students in their dorm rooms, in their meals, that we plan for those students who have difficulties getting home. So they will be taken care of regardless of when and how long that period takes. Can our student be taken care of with health insurance? There'll be absolutely no change in what's in place now. A minor or an adult who has provided their health insurance card to us will be treated the same way now. They will report to our infirmary if they're sick for any reason. If it exceeds our infirmary's capability of dealing with it, we will immediately transport to one of the 2 hospitals here in town. Are they able to stay in the barracks until school is back or till normal? I think we've kind of answered that question. If they have to move out, can NMMI support them to find a new accommodation? Well, the answer is they don't have to move out. They will stay in their dorm room until they can actually leave to go home. If my son takes a flight back to Vietnam, he will be established in a military base in country for a certain period of time. Living there, there may not be internet access. Are there options? Again, I think we've answered that. The internet is available 24/7. As soon as they can access it, any classes they missed will be recorded and be up there available so they can catch up and not miss any classroom. Are any NMMI faculty or staff at risk by staying open? The answer is no, because we're not requiring them to interface with each other, faculty, staff, or cadets, especially these next 2 weeks. There will be no classroom instruction going on. It'll all be online. The students that are here on campus will be taking those classes from their dorm room online. Faculty or staff that are here doing their job will be using the social distancing criteria and staying 6 to 10 feet away from each other. Our supervisors have the authority to stagger their workforce, to bring in part one day, part the next, whatever it takes to get them to accomplish the things that needed to be done. So no one will be at risk. No one will be put into a situation to put themselves at risk. How are cadets to return to school their issued property and their personal items? It's a very good question. And again, it's all dependent upon what the next step is. Do we move to online education completely, or do we have some period where we return to classroom? Those are great questions, and until I know that, I don't know the answer. But the Commandant, I can assure you, and his staff are already addressing how we would return property, personal property, and then in turn, how we would instruct the cadets to return the laptops to us. We know it's an issue. We don't have an answer at this time until we know what the next phase of this is going to be. Are you taking into consideration that some families are limited to internet? Yes, we are. And I don't know about all local locations. I know that here in Roswell, our one primary internet provider used to be Cable One. It's now Sparklight. They are providing free internet services for people that need it. So I ask you to please check with your local providers and see if something like that is not available in your area, to ensure that you have adequate access to internet for the students to receive their education. Will there be an academic grading curve? Again, I'm going to defer to Colonel Brick. He is the Vice Dean of the entire school and the high school principal. George, the next 2 or 3 questions, I'll read them and then you can address them. Will there be an academic grading curve? Will academic assistance be available online? Can you address those 2, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. We don't believe in academic grading curve as one would normally think of a curve to be necessary, because students will be able to go online on Canvas, which is the program that we use, and they're all very familiar with it and have logged into it many times. And they there will be able to see their grades. They'll be able to see assignments that are due and when they are due, and they will also be able to submit papers and quizzes and things like that. So we will have to, of course, see how things emerge, but we don't see much of a difference there with the grading process. That will primarily be up to the faculty member based on how the participation goes along as the class progresses, especially during this first 2-week period. Regarding study assistance, there are a number of ways to do that. First of all, students have always and can still contact their teacher by email to get any kind of assistance they need. They can also contact their advisor at the Student Assistance Center, and there are a number of other contacts at the Tolles Learning Research Center, and I'll be talking with Colonel Kayla Smith about that beginning right away, so that we can make it more convenient and possibly spread out the opportunities to find someone to talk to during a certain period of time. Now, I doubt that we will, the best time to do it is during our normal night study hall time, because now we're dealing with a number of different time zones. So we'll figure that out. We will do everything we can to make it most convenient for the students.
Thank you, Colonel Brick. Colonel Graff, the next 2 questions are in your area of expertise. Would you answer these? First one is, how will you keep cadets safe during meal times? The next one is, what are you going to do about cadet formations?
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to talk to that. So with formations, we're not going to have formations. Cadets will be housed in their own individual rooms. We have enough empty rooms right now in Hagerman Barracks that we're going to take those that are in Saunders and house them in Hagerman Barracks, where every cadet has their own room. So when it comes to formation time, we'll ask those cadets at those times to come out of the room, stand on the stoop so we can see everybody that's out there. For some reason, somebody doesn't come out, of course, we're going to go check on them. but they'll all be in their own rooms and they'll be presenting themselves on the stoop at those formation times. As far as keeping cadets safe during meal times, we're not going to use Bates dining hall. What we will do is we're working with Sodexo to provide meals that would be served on a grab and go basis. So those meals would be brought to a central point in Hagerman Barracks, probably at the Sally Port. Cadets would practice social distancing, go from their rooms to the Sally Port to pick up their meal and take it back to the room. They'll still get 3 meals a day. We won't be doing 4th meal, but what I've asked Sodexo to do is to plus up a little bit in that evening meal with some snacks so the cadets have food throughout the day, throughout the evening, whatever they need. And then if there are extra requirements or dietary requirements, of course, as we follow those throughout the year, we'll continue to practice those with what we're doing for those meal times.
Thank you, Commandant. We addressed graduation. We don't know what form it will take, but we owe it to our graduates to have some type of ceremony in their honor. So again, I ask you, be patient with us as this develops, but we will honor those students with some form of graduation. The next one, what about an Easter break? It's a very good question, and one, again, that will, I'm sure, have to be answered in consideration of what the governor does next. If you've looked at our calendar, you know that if we start back on April 6th, we would turn right around and be off that next immediate Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for an Easter break. Having been gone 3 weeks, we probably would not take those days off. We would stay here, we would be in the classroom, and we would honor the Easter period here with the students being allowed to go to the religious preference of their choice here in town or our own chapel. But I do not see us taking a spring break if we start back into classes on Monday, April 6th. Now, there's been a couple of questions come in that we want to answer as we've been talking. If you'll let me look over here just a minute. This is a great question, and I really appreciate it because it shows the type of family that Mexico Military Institute family is. The question, how can U.S. parents help international students? Thank you very much again for that question. When we get down to that number that we just simply cannot help get home by flight and travel restrictions, one obvious answer is to allow them to become an ambassador of family and to let them come to your home during this period until we can get them home. Or if it takes that long, until we start class in August. So a great question. Thanks to any U.S. parent that would be willing to become an ambassador of family and take care of an international student who simply cannot get home. Question for the Commandant again, Colonel Graff. How will we choose the leadership of the Corps next year?
Well, we've already selected the RC for next year, and he and I have been talking via email. So for the cadre next year, what we would likely do is ask for volunteers against once all the virus is cleared up, then we'd be looking for our normal summer cadre to come in and report early. So same normal requirements as far as GPA and deportment. Cadets must be in good standing, and then based on who comes back early and then the positions that are open, we'll start selecting cadets and having boards for those positions. But we're not going to select anybody when we're in the current situation that we are now.
Thank you, Commandant. The question now is, how many cadets will need to have been tested for COVID-19 for the school to be shut down? It's really a question I can't answer. I can tell you that in our coordination with the State Health Department, with the CDC, with our infirmary talking to their parent company, what we know to happen is if we have a student test positive, that the State Health Department will come in and take over, essentially. Whether they leave the student here, whether they move them to another facility, at that point, it's going to be up to the state and national healthcare professionals to treat those individual students. So I don't know what that number is, or even if there is a number, because we anticipate the state and federal healthcare officials taking over at that time. Will cadets be tested for the virus? Because now you do not have to show symptoms to have it. I think we've already established this. First off, you don't just test independently or at will. You only test if there's symptoms. And if someone is symptomatic, we would first test them for influenza A or B. That is within the capability of our infirmary. If they test positive for influenza A or B, we'll treat them accordingly. If they do not test positive, they're still symptomatic, that's when we would call and ask for the state to come in and test the individual. We do not have that capability ourselves. Roswell as a city has been established as a testing site, so there is the capability locally, but we will not be doing that on our own. Only if a cadet shows symptoms would we take any action. If you have a student that is abroad, how will NMMI handle their return from an international destination? We do have a few that were abroad. We don't know if they'll be able to make it back. We had 2 athletes, one to Germany and one to France for actual healthcare treatment. We just don't know, but they will follow, if they make it through the protocols of our country and can make it all the way to NMMI, then they would follow the same protocols as we're putting these students in for the next 2 weeks. They would go into a self-isolation concept until that period has been eliminated. For online classes, are we supposed to be online at the time we would normally be in class? What about time zone issues? Again, a very, very good question. We'll be broadcasting the class in accordance with our regular class schedule. If you're 12 hours apart from us, and that means you're on at 10 at night, that's the very reason we are recording every class. We don't expect someone to wait up till midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning to be at a compatible time. That's why we're recording them. So watch the recording, and you will maintain your proficiency in the class. So we've taken that into consideration. That consideration was the recording of every class. Who should be the primary contact for students to ask questions specific to their situation? Most likely the questions we think will come in 2 areas. The commandant's area as it relates to student life, or in academics as it relates to their classes, their grades, etc. So we would encourage them to follow those 2 avenues of questioning. Take your questions regarding student life, housing, etc. to the commandant. Take your questions regarding academics to the dean or the vice dean, and they will get you an answer. Follow that protocol just as if you were here, and you will get your answer. All of the cadets know how to contact their faculty, and they know how to contact their troop leadership advisors. So follow those channels if those questions fall into those 2 areas of expertise. To clarify, if a cadet wishes to complete the semester online, would that be acceptable? The answer is yes. We know, as I've already stated, we have students in foreign countries who just simply cannot get back. We've already been working with them now to complete the semester and to finish there, in this one young lady's case, her senior year and graduate from high school from NMMI. If the student or the parent believe it is in the best interest of them and their family to remain home and complete the semester online, yes, we will accommodate that. How is NMMI's IT department going to deal with the social distancing? Gloves, 6 feet apart, etc. And that is the answer. If they have to go to a cadet's room, then they have gloves, masks, and they will go take care of the issue. We could also separate the student from the laptop to where they have that social distance. But we'll recognize and honor that social distancing by equipping our staff here with the means to go take care of the situation. That same protocols that we have here of the cadets notifying IT if they have trouble, and then we'll deal with it on an individual basis. Whether the student is allowed to go down to IT, exercising social distancing, or IT goes there, we'll take care of that. Can the cadets get a bus from school to Albuquerque Airport as soon as flights are confirmed? The answer is yes. Usually we have bulk numbers of students who want to go to the Albuquerque Airport, and we arrange for a large bus. But if the student wants to arrange for their own transportation from here to Albuquerque Airport, if they can't get flights out of Roswell, then they certainly will be allowed to do that. Again, it's this next 2-week period, once we get definition of where we're going, if it's to close the classrooms for the remainder of the semester, we will be helping and actually very proactively working with every cadet that's here on campus to get them home as soon as possible. Can we see friends in self-isolation if we are all from New Mexico? Well, let's back up. If you're from New Mexico, you shouldn't be here. You should stay at home. If you have not crossed the state line, if you've remained within the state of New Mexico, then there's no self-isolation. So if you were an international student and you stayed in New Mexico, you'll come here and you'll be placed in a room by yourself. The key is if you cross the state line. That's going to be the defining factor. And we'll be asking each of the students that are returning, where did you go? So we know how to deal with the individual situation. I would add that the New Mexico Health Department has identified what they're calling hot zones, areas of high instances of the virus, Seattle being one. If you go on the New Mexico Health Department's webpage, there's a listing of those. So we're going to be asking if a student went to any of those high intensity areas. There's a protocol for them. If they did, they're to call a 1-800 number and simply report in that I went there and I'm now back in New Mexico. But we'll walk them through every bit of that if we have one that falls into that category of being in one of those high-risk areas. All cadet activities and sports canceled for the rest of the semester. Yes. The New Mexico Athletic Association, which governs our high school sports, has canceled all sports for the remainder of the semester. The NJCAA, the National Junior College Athletic Association, has canceled all sports at the junior college level for the rest of the semester. So there will be no sports activities. Obviously, if we're not be here, there are not going to be any cadet activities as well. How will the cadets pick up their belongings? Again, we ask that you wait to determine for us to get the determination from the governor as to whether we will go back to any form of classroom education. If we do not, then we will work. The commandant, as I said earlier, and his staff are already working to deal with the protocols of how students get their personal belongings. Students from within New Mexico probably can just come pick it up. Students outside the state, international students, we'll work with them on how to get their equipment and personal belongings to them. Same about our laptops. At the end of the semester, obviously that question can't be answered until sometime in May. Then we'll be providing instructions for the students to return the laptops to us. What are we going to do about the situation with the bathrooms since they are communal bathrooms? Fantastic question. We talked about that at length with the commandant. Again, what we're looking at is a schedule for showers. Obviously, for other personal needs, they'll need to go when they need to go. They'll have to be understanding of the social distance requirement and stay away from each other. But as far as showers, the commandant will work up some type of schedule for the cadets to go and shower on a rotational basis, which doesn't put anybody or any great numbers of people in contact with each other at the same time. Let's see. For the commandant, Colonel Graff, a question for the commandant. Will drill practice still be conducted for the final parade?
Well, so I think that's dependent on whether or not everybody comes back after 6 April. But if all cadet activities are canceled, it's hard to say that we're going to have drill for the same reasons. If things do return to normal here by the mid to late April, then our last parade is scheduled for about the end of April. So it's hard to imagine that we do drill and parade under these circumstances. I'd have to say no at this point.
The next one, Commandant, is for you as well. If a cadet moves into an occupied room while that person's not on campus, will they be informed? In other words, when you move these students around to consolidate them in Hagerman, will they move into already empty rooms?
That's a good question, sir. We're not going to put anybody into a room that's already occupied. So cadets that come back will go to their own room. Primarily international cadets is what we're expecting. So international cadets are always roomed with a cadet from the U.S. So cadets from the U.S. we're not expecting to have here. For those that we want to consolidate, the cadets in Saunders, for example, the numbers that we're expecting, we have plenty of empty rooms in Hagerman that will put those cadets into an empty room. We're not going to put anybody into a room that's got somebody's stuff in it who is not here. We're just not going to do that. Thank you.
Commandant, one more. What about PT for the cadets who are here?
So it's another really good question, sir. We'd have to practice social distancing. We're not going to have mandatory PT. It'll be probably through a program that I would expect the athletic director to give us some input on. But of course, health and exercise are important to the situation. We want cadets to spend some time outside, get the fresh air, get some sunshine. Those are both great treatments for any kind of sickness. But we wouldn't be doing that kind of situation or that kind of practice in a situation where everybody's right next to each other. They'd have to be spread out or doing it on their own primarily.
Okay. The next question, who will my son need to see to book a seat on the bus to Albuquerque? Again, once we get to that point, we'll take a head count of how many need to get to Albuquerque to see if we need to charter a big bus like we normally do, or what requirements we have. Once we know the requirements of how many people need to get to Albuquerque, then we will tell the cadets and or the parents what they need to do to make that transportation possible. So let us again get to that point, find out how many need transportation, and then we'll establish a way to help get them to Albuquerque. For the cadets doing the online option, when can they go pick up their belongings? Again, let us get to the point that we know if we're going to have any cadets on campus at all the remainder of the semester, and then we'll start dealing with how to pick up belongings, whether you're in-state, out-of-state, or international. Please let us get to the point of knowing what the rest of the semester looks like first, and then we'll put out information about how to arrange to get your belongings, whether you come to pick them up or whether we ship them to you in some form. Let's see, I think so far that's all the questions. Is there anything else that we haven't answered that we can answer for someone? Please use the chat forum, send a question in. You have us here, you have the senior staff of the Institute available for you. Please let us answer any questions you have. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in over the chat. I again want to thank you so much for your time. If you have questions, you know, I think everyone knows all of our email addresses. They're very simple. It's almost always our last name at nmmi.edu. So for me personally, it's just grizzle@nmmi.edu. Let us answer your questions. We will get an answer for you. What has been our practice over this last 10 days, as I stated earlier, is as soon as we get a proclamation or an edict from the governor's office, the first thing we do is analyze the impact to NMMI and what actions we need to take. As soon as we know that, we then post the entire proclamation plus our guidance to the website. We send it out to staff, faculty, and cadets. We send it out to the parents, and we send it out to our alumni. And we post it on our own website, nmmi.edu. Please, if you have questions, let us try to get the answer for you. I literally was on the phone with the governor's office 20 minutes before this conversation started online, getting clarification of the definition of social isolation and social distancing, so we can be in compliance with what the governor expects in this area. We will get you the answer if you will pose the question and give us an opportunity to answer. So one more question has come up. Will work-study students be able to work? Again, for this next 2 weeks, the answer is no. Once we determine if we're going to go back into the classroom, then that means, obviously, to me, that the social isolation issue is off the table because we wouldn't be able to go into the classroom. One of the proclamations right now is that we have no more than 10 people in a gathering at one place in one time. So to go back to the classroom, that edict would have to be removed. That would mean we could return to some normal activities. Work study would be one of them. What will happen with laundry services? How will cadets be able to clean their clothes? Commandant, I know you've addressed that. You want to answer that question?
Yes, sir. The laundry service is still going to be open. We're probably going to have some uniform modifications due to the circumstances, and we'll talk more about that with the cadets when they get here. But laundry drop-off will be on Thursday and pickup will be on Tuesday. Still going through All-American cleaners like they have been.
Another question for the Commandant. How will students who have to fulfill 30 hours of community service by peer tutoring and group projects, how will they meet this requirement?
So for those kind of situations, I'm sure we could work out something that would be beneficial to the cadet as far as being able to fulfill that responsibility. Tours, of course, is an individual activity, so they still be able to do tours. But as far as community service, be more than willing to talk to the cadets and their TLAs about how we can work that out. But yeah, we'll make some adjustments on that.
I'm going to defer to the Commandant on this one. It's something we've had extensive discussions about, and the current PMS has been involved, Colonel Aaron Johnson, but Commandant being a former PMS, the question is, how do we meet the obligations for ROTC and commissioning?
So I know for junior ROTC, they're already working through that as far as being able to do the classes online. For senior ROTC and commissioning, the word is not in yet from Cadet Command as to how they're going to fulfill those obligations. I know some cadets have requirements with their guard units. For example, some of the guard units here in New Mexico are on standby, and those unit requirements will still apply. But Cadet Command is working with the schools and with those PMSs to address those requirements as they get closer to commissioning. So I don't have the exact answer for that, sir. I know that Colonel Johnson is working it, but he hasn't given us back the requirements for the summer camps or for any of those other requirements. I know that JPA has been canceled, those that were still outstanding for junior ROTC. I would imagine that with some of the FTX requirements and those kind of things that must be done on a group level, that they'll either wait and do a delayed commissioning, or they may waive that altogether and say that that's something that those lieutenants would have to do when they get to the unit. But that's just conjecture at this point. We don't have an answer on that yet.
Commandant, you might explain JPA. That's a new term some may not be familiar with.
Yes, sir. The JPA is the Junior ROTC Program Assessment. We've already done ours, and the cadets did an outstanding job. Honestly, they did really, really well. So still earned the honor unit with distinction, accolation, and it's not something that we have to worry about for the rest of this year. For other schools that have not done that yet, they're waiving that requirement for the rest of this year.
And when we met before, for everybody that's on concerned about this, there are a couple of requirements that are in-state requirements, such as rifle qualification, a staff ride up to Glorieta Pass. We can certainly support those if we go back to classroom instruction to ensure that our potential new second lieutenants meet those requirements. We can help, and we can do those within the state. The athletic director is not on the call. I apologize. The question is, how would athletes work in the off season? Would they be able to work out and lift as a team? If we go back to classroom education and the students return, again, I believe all the restrictions of social distancing, self-isolation would be off. And so, yes, the teams will be able to work out. If they're not, if we do not return, I can assure you that the coaches will be in contact with team members and providing them suggested workout plans to conduct on their own over the time period between now and when we can reconvene, hopefully in August. Is the infirmary still providing masks, hand sanitizers, and other products? Actually, that's handled through our facilities department. They provide to all of the classrooms, the lavatories, everything, the hand sanitizers, cleaning products, everything that's needed to fight off the virus, to protect you on an individual basis or a group basis in the classrooms, the buildings, the latrines, is provided by our facilities department, and they are well stocked. We've already had that inventory done, and they are ready to continue providing Kleenexes, soap, everything that's needed to fight off the virus at that level. And again, it's through our facilities department, not through the infirmary. I'm not seeing any more questions at this point. We've been on about 50 minutes. We appreciate everyone's time. We, again, never anticipated we'd be conducting a forum like this, but we will again if need be. And as soon as we get guidance from the governor's office about what next to do, you will be the first to know. And then we can all plan accordingly. As I said earlier, I would hope you would expect from a military perspective that we have planned. We have worked what the military calls branches and sequels. We think we've anticipated about anything the governor might do, and we're ready to react accordingly just as soon as we get her guidance. As soon as we do, we'll let all of the constituents know what we'll be doing from that point on. So you have the plan for the next 2 weeks. It's to go to online education. It's to have a small group of students here on campus who will be in their individual rooms. They will conduct their education from the room. We will provide for their health and safety, their meals while they're here, while we wait on this next answer from the governor. So again, I think we'll close. We've kept you again 50 minutes. We very, very much appreciate the questions. We hope we've got them answered for you, but do not hesitate to contact any of us if you have additional questions that you think of or that we didn't answer adequately. So thank you. We're going to sign off now. We very much appreciate your attendance in this forum. Goodbye.